Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Smack Talk Live. I'm Coach along with Lone Wolf. And Lone Wolf, to be honest, not a very exciting week in the world of sports. Really on the field, more interesting stuff off the field with really the Ravens and some issues with the COVID, things like that. But other than that, not too much. Obviously, it was a holiday week, and that's why we're doing the show today. Going through today's action, the only big surprise I had here, the Falcons demolishing the Raiders.
Yeah, I was going to say that same thing.
It wasn't even a game. So what are your thoughts on today's action? I mean,
yeah, I mean, I looked at that game and, I watched a little bit of it. And it really was a closer game in the first half. But for whatever reason, the Raiders' offense just really seemed to be completely stymied throughout the entirety of the game. And I don't know if that's just because they just couldn't establish the run. The Falcons did play better on defense, and they had a lot of turnovers. But I was shocked at how much they just fell apart in that game. As for the other games, I don't know. There wasn't a lot of surprises, but I will say there are some teams that I would talk about from a standpoint of I think they have to be a little careful in terms of where they are, and the playoff picture has gotten a little murky. And one team that jumps to mind in particular is the Cardinals. They're 6-5 now, and that's a dangerous spot for you to be in. They've looked like one of the better teams in football this year in some games, and then they have looked like this, and that's, if I were a Cardinals fan, that's a concerning thing for me. You're probably going to end up in the playoffs, but this team. Let's just be clear. This team is not there yet. So they're not a Super Bowl contender or anything like that. So I hope people realize that this team is too inconsistent. They're just not quite there yet.
Right, and that was kind of a surprise there that the Patriots were able to come away with the victory on that in that game. Now, like you said, the Cardinals have a good shot of making the playoffs because right now they are in that final seed, depending on what happens with the Packers-Bear game tonight. If the Packers win, the Bears are there then tied with the Vikings for that 8th seed. And if San Francisco pulls off a victory, they'd be tied there too. Now, the interesting thing is if there's talk with the Baltimore-Pittsburgh game, is that because the Ravens have a ton of guys that are on the COVID list.
Right.
And Lamar Jackson included.
Right. Yep.
And there's talk that if they don't have enough guys to play on Tuesday, that they may be forced to forfeit.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Which then that puts the NFL into that emergency playoff protocol where they may allow 8 teams from each conference in.
Right.
Which then puts the Bears, Vikings, and 49ers and a tie for that eighth and final playoff spot. I can understand their rationale for doing this, for allowing, 8 teams in. I don't like it because then it no longer gives the top teams a reason to really push forward for that number one spot.
Right, I agree because there's no buy then.
Right.
You're all just playing.
There's no bye. So as long as you are in the top four, you get a home playoff game, at least one. So
Right.
what would be the point then of, if you have a couple guys dinged up, you're going to be, 1 through 4, instead
I
of
mean,
playing.
there's no incentive there. You there's no difference between the 1 and the 4 seed in that case. So who cares kind of where you end up? I mean, either way, you're getting a home playoff game, like you said. So what's the difference? There really isn't any in that case. I don't think.
Right.
Other than maybe getting home field if you move forward. But even then, home field really hasn't been that factor this year because there just are either no fans or a very limited amount of fans that it hasn't really made that much of a difference.
Oh, exactly. And that's the thing. Home field's advantage this year is not going to be as much of an advantage as it usually is because you're gonna have limited or no fans at the game. So besides travel, there is no advantage, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Some people may disagree. Um, you know, so it's going to be that's interesting. Um,
Yeah, we'll
moving
have to see. I
forward.
mean, they moved it to Tuesday. So far, all of the games that the NFL has moved this year have been played. So when they got moved, they've been able to be played. This game may be the first one that really tests the limits of this to see whether or not that they move forward with it. I don't know.
Yeah, because
Um,
you have multiple Ravens, Ian and James Conner from the Steelers is what also
right.
tested positive. So um, it's going to be interesting to see how the NFL handles this moving forward.
Yeah. Yeah, and the game itself, I think is interesting too because you have a rivalry game here. If this goes forward, um, the Ravens already have an uphill battle on winning this game. But if you don't have Lamar Jackson and you have some of these other guys out, some of the starting running backs and stuff that are out, I don't see any way Baltimore wins this game. And that puts them at 6-5, and then they've been spiraling in that poor direction anyway. So that's really going to make it difficult when it comes to them making the playoffs. This is a team that things are kind of coming apart at the seams a little bit for them.
Oh, I agree. And I said this last year at the end of the year. Lamar Jackson had a great season, and everybody's talking about he is another Patrick Mahomes type quarterback, this and that. And I said, hold on, it was one season. Now look, he's pedestrian this year.
Right.
He's an upper half of the league quarterback, but he, the skill set of a Patrick Mahomes and Aaron Rodgers does not found all the time.
Right.
And you have to show me consistency. Mahomes, I said the same thing about Mahomes after his first year, but he came back and he's done it year in and year out. So okay, he's going to be probably considered one of the all-time greats when his career is done, and that's fine. But show it to me in multiple years in a row, not just one year, because that doesn't do
Mm-hmm.
anything for me.
No, flash. That's a flash in the pan. Then.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Um, Going back to Thanksgiving Day, um, you have two very, I mean, I tried to watch parts of these on my phone, but two boring games.
Yeah.
Um, Washington just shellacks the Cowboys, and then the Texans just kicked the crap out of the Lions. Um, and we've talked about this, and there's reports out there that, the Cowboys have said there's no way they're firing Mike McCarthy after 1 year.
Yeah,
I don't know how you make that comment.
I don't know how you make that comment right now.
I just
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense to me either. This is one where we looked at it. We talked about this before. We felt like the locker room kind of quit on him, and they beat the Vikings, the previous week. But this game, with Andy Dalton back, I thought, well, the offense might be humming along a little bit more. And to be fair to him, not everything is really his fault. So I'm not going to put the blame on Andy Dalton or anything like that. The offense didn't look bad, but a lot of it's the play calling. So in this game, and I don't know if you saw this or not, the Cowboys are on their side of the field, and maybe at about the 30, we can look at the exact yard line, but they go for it on 4th and 10 with a fake punt.
yeah.
That was one of the worst calls I've ever seen. I mean, I like seeing a coach be aggressive, but that's not aggressive. That's just stupid. And they didn't look like they knew what they were doing, and it failed, and it gave Washington a short field, and they easily scored a touchdown.
Right, exactly. I don't know why you make that play call, to be honest. It's not like, it was end of the half or it was, end of the game. You had to make a play. It wasn't anything like that. It was just a
No, it's 20 to
stupid play
16,
call.
and there's plenty of time left on the clock.
Um, and like you said, this is not Dalton's fault. His stat line was 25, 35, 215 yards and a touchdown. That's not, those are decent quarterback numbers. Any team that's struggling at quarterback would love to have those quarterback stats.
Yeah, yeah.
Would love to have those stats.
And he did
Uh,
have one interception, but I saw the interception. He threw it, I don't know, like 8, 9 feet in the air, and Montez Sweat went up, batted it, and grabbed it, and it was just an insane play. Like the guy made a great play. So I don't really put that on Andy Dalton for that pick because just a freakishly athletic play to get the pick. So otherwise, yeah, he played pretty good.
I mean, I look at the Cowboys. You only had 2 wins with Dak Prescott.
Right.
You have 1 win without him.
Right.
I am more tolerable with your record after you lost him. I still look at when you had Dak Prescott and a quarterback and your offense was scoring points,
Yeah.
you still stunk.
Right. You still couldn't win games.
And I don't know how you get you. I just don't know how you can give Mike McCarthy a pass on this.
Right.
Um,
I agree. Yeah. I mean, that's exactly right. Yeah. You can't make the comment now like, oh, well, he's going to come back next year. I mean, I don't think you have to comment on it. Of course, reporters are going to ask you about it, but you don't have to comment on it. You can say, well, we're not ready to make that determination. The year's not over or something.
right.
Come on.
Yeah. Um, but that does put Washington now. They are down in the tiebreaker with the Giants, who won today over the Bengals. Daniel Jones did hurt a hamstring. Is getting an MRI on that. If Daniel Jones is out, I think that puts Washington in the driver's seat in that division, which is sad to say.
Very sad. Yeah.
But if the Giants lose Daniel Jones, you beat the Bengals without who does not have Joe Burrow anymore by 2 points.
Yeah.
That doesn't bode well for you.
No. Well, and this team is a work in progress. I mean, the Giants just are. So we didn't expect them to be very good this year. They're not. They seem to be playing pretty hard in a lot of games, so that's a plus for them. But just talent-wise, they're just not there with a lot of other teams. So, I mean, we'll see how it goes with Judge, but I didn't expect them to be very good. So,
right. I'll tell you what, the biggest change for Washington Alex Smith. And
Yes.
if Washington decides not to bring Alex Smith back at quarterback next year, they're stupid. They
Right.
don't have a franchise quarterback on their roster. And he will, in my opinion, Alex Smith will start in the league next year.
Yeah.
I know he's older, but before he had that gruesome leg injury, he was one of the better statistical quarterbacks in the league. And
Hmm.
Washington was having a good year that year. Um,
Yeah, and he looked. I mean, even with the leg, he looked like he was moving around really well. And he's been pretty smart with the football. And it seems like this is the lift that they needed to get where they needed to go. So, you know, Ron Rivera didn't have Dwayne Haskins in his sights as to wanting him to be his quarterback. He was there before Ron Rivera showed up, so he doesn't feel tied to him in any way. And honestly, I don't know that that was their solution anyway. He just didn't seem to be working out. So they're probably going to have to they'll move on from him. And I think you're right. They need to keep Alex Smith and then figure out what they want to do for the future at quarterback.
exactly. It's Dwayne Haskins that was a horrible draft pick
Yeah.
um, by Washington. That was a wasted draft pick. Um, they will probably be looking at drafting a quarterback this year in this next draft, if not in the first round, in the second round. Um, my thought is you build quality tools around the quarterback position and lock up Alex Smith for another 2 3 years, and then draft a guy in the second or third round, let him sit and see what you got. Um,
Right.
I think you do it that way because you'll probably be in the top 10 in the draft picks unless you make the playoffs.
Right.
And
Which they might.
if you're in the top 10, they're talking about there's going to be a ton of quarterbacks taken this year in the first round. Oh, great. I don't think any of them are going to be really great NFL quarterbacks. You know,
Right.
I just don't see it. So
Yeah, everybody's on the Trevor Lawrence train, but I think
yeah,
that's a discussion for another time for us. But yeah.
right. So we'll
But
see.
so I mean, the question then becomes, and this is kind of a side question, but do you think Dwayne Haskins ends up somewhere else and starts?
No, I think Dwayne Haskins will be out of the league.
Okay.
I really
Yeah.
I
Okay.
don't think anybody is going to sign him, pick him up as a potential starter. They may bring him back in as a third string quarterback, um, and maybe hopes to resurrect him somehow, some way. But I
Hmm.
think he'll in another 2 years he will not even be in the league. To be
Yeah,
honest,
and I think that he'll end up somewhere as a backup or a third stringer next year, but um, I don't know. I'm not ready to write him off completely yet, but I think he'll end up somewhere as a backup. I don't think he'll be a starter. I agree with that.
so. Texans, yeah, there's not much to. We'll talk about more about the Lions situation here in one of our other segments.
Yeah.
Um, but that was just a pounding by the Texans, which is good for them. But happy you got the win, but you did beat the Lions. So, you know,
But
um,
hey, a win's a win for a team that had fired their head coach already this year, so they'll take it.
so, um, Browns beat the Jaguars, who I just read has fired their GM, but not
Okay.
the head coach. So that's an interesting development there. The Dolphins beat the Jets, but not was not impressive there. Now, um, I want to talk about the Dolphins with Tua because it has come out that this week that he had a thumb injury, and that's why didn't start this week. And Flores, your man, has come out and said
Yeah.
if he was healthy, he's the guy.
Right.
I think that's a stupid statement to make. I think your team is much better with Fitzpatrick under center. Especially now, you are in the driver's seat for a wild card spot. I think that's really, really a stupid comment to make. I do not think Tua is ready, whether he's healthy or not. The rest of the way, you have 5 games remaining. You need to win at least 3 to guarantee a playoff spot. What are your feelings there? Because I know the Dolphins are your second team here, and Flores is your man. What's your thought on Tua Fitzpatrick, and who would you prefer to see quarterback in the Dolphins the rest of the way?
Well, there's two things going on here that I'll say. So first thing, I do like the fact that Brian Flores came out and said that this person is our guy, because you don't run into what's going on in other teams. Like we've talked about the Bears, they can't seem to decide who their quarterback is going to be, and then they've had some injuries. But if you have two quarterbacks, you have none. That whole thing. So I'm glad that he at least said definitively, if this person is healthy, they are the starter. Because I don't like quarterback controversies, because I think that pretty much destroys what the team is trying to do. Now, that being said, I agree. I am not sold on Tua. I think he needs to sit. I think he needs to wait. This team is winning mostly off of defense and special teams. I mean, they have played well enough on offense, but I think people get enamored. They see the skill set that Tua supposedly has and thinks that, he's going to be the guy who will be an all-pro or something. And we just don't know yet. We haven't seen enough out of him yet. He hasn't shocked us or amazed us yet, no matter what any of those people that went out of their minds for him were saying about him. He's not that guy. So I'm kind of disappointed. I think they should ride Fitzpatrick through the year and see where that lands you. Because come playoff time, a rookie quarterback, generally they don't perform well. And I honestly think if Tua is playing in the playoffs for the Dolphins, he's going to be one of the reasons that they'll lose in the playoffs, not one of the reasons that they win in the playoffs.
Well,
So
I
that's my
agree.
thought.
I agree. I don't think Tua has what it takes to get them into a playoff run. Um, you know, I've never been sold on Tua, and he's gonna have to prove it on the field that he is a starting quarterback in the NFL. So I'll tell you right now, you look at all the rookies. Joe Burrow, yeah, he got hurt, but I'll tell you right now, I would still take Justin Herbert over any of the guys drafted right now. I think he's the best by far.
He's playing most like a starter, like a solid starter that you would want to play. I think he's had a bad game, but just generally speaking, he's looked the most poised and not rattled by playing at certain levels of competition. He played well against the Chiefs. He's played well against a lot of other really good teams, and his stat line is really, really good. So the guy is right now, to me, looking like the best of the quarterback class for this year. If you had to rate people just for this year,
Right, exactly. I like Herbert. Um, you know, after watching him so far this year. We'll talk about the Jets when we get to the hot list or hot seat. Sorry. We talked about Patriots over Cardinals. Hurts the Cardinals doesn't really change much for the Patriots. They're on the outside looking in. They basically have to win out to make the playoffs.
and I don't think they will. I think they're not making the postseason.
We have the Vikings beating the Panthers in a wild game, and I watched this one at the end. And this game puts the Vikings on the cusp of now making the playoffs.
Yeah.
You know, and that's interesting. I don't think the Vikings are a playoff team, but if they allow 8 teams in, they are still very much in the hunt. And I believe they have to play the Bears twice yet.
Hmm.
Uh, so
I
you
think
can
you're right about that. So there lies the
well,
um,
they play the Bears once. They have to play the Bears. But here's their schedule the rest of the way. Jaguars, which I'm going to give them a W. The Jaguars have lost 10 in a row.
yeah.
Buccaneers, I think they'll lose there. So you're looking at 6-7. But then the Bears at 6-6. Saints, I'll give the Saints the W there because it's at New Orleans, and then the Lions. So they could finish 8-8, and 8-8, and right now this year will I believe make the postseason.
Well,
Uh,
especially if you have that eighth team. Yeah.
exactly. So that's going to be interesting because I'll tell you right now, if you're Green Bay, you don't want to see the Vikings because they know how to beat you. Um,
Right. Absolutely.
you know, and it's not whether they're a better team than you; they know how to beat you.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things
Yeah.
where
It's not a team you want to see in the postseason if you're the Packers at all.
where if you're Green Bay sitting at number 3, the Vikings get number 8, you're like, good,
Right.
we'll
Perfect.
take the 3. We don't
Yep.
want the 1. Um, so that was a wild game. Poor clock management by the Panthers on that final drive where they kicked a field goal to go up by 6. They threw the ball numerous times when they didn't have to and could have really left the Vikings in a situation where they'd have like less than a minute to go in the game.
Yeah.
But they passed the ball even on the 3rd and goal before they kicked the field goal. They threw the ball.
Yeah. Those are questionable coaching decisions, and I think that's where you see the inexperience of their head coach in that type of situation.
But I mean, as a coach at any level, if you're trying to win the game by controlling the clock, just don't throw it. And
Right.
if you don't get the first down, you don't get the first down, you kick the ball. But at least the clock is running. Every time
Right.
you throw the ball, you're basically giving another team a timeout.
Yeah,
And
and that is a mistake, and I agree. I mean, it just, but it's weird, coach, because you say that at any level you should be doing that. So when I make a comment like, "Oh, he's showing his inexperience," is there really any excuse for a coach to do that then? I mean,
no,
or am I
I
kind of
don't.
giving him a pass by saying something like that?
I don't believe so because there's no excuse because it's common coaching sense. The clock is running. The Vikings had 0 or 1 timeout left,
Mm-hmm.
and they had a 2nd and like 7, and they
Okay.
threw the ball twice, incomplete both times. If they run the ball both times, you run it all the way down to the 2-minute warning.
Yeah.
Okay. So what if you punt it? Okay. They muff the punt
Yeah.
and you recover. And you run the ball, you get they take timeout, and then they get to the 2-minute warning. Then on 3rd down, you could have worked the clock all the way down to about a minute and a half left before you kick that field goal.
Right. You just run the football. Yep. Right up the
But
gut.
you throw the
Lob
ball
tackle or something. Yeah.
and
Yep.
only take about 6 seconds off the clock because
Mm-hmm.
you run the play, he gets tackled. The clock is still running while they set the ball, set the play clock.
Yep.
It you want to give teams the minimal amount of time to score and put the pressure on them. There was no pressure on them. The Vikings had plenty of time because of the management of the clock.
Right.
And it irritates me when I see coaches do that. It's like, why are you throwing the ball when you have the lead and all you have to do is burn clock?
Right.
burn as much time as possible. And then instead of throwing underneath short, like the Vikings were and did until they got into, deep into your zone, they have to go farther down the field. And those are less percentage to be successful than if those short ones.
Hmm.
Um, so I just really feel that that loss is on the coach for the Panthers. So it really changes it. You go from a 5-win team to a 4-win team, and now you're possibly 2 games out of the playoff chase rather than a game.
Yeah.
So
And that's just it too. That's the biggest thing is, look, you can say whatever you want about records this year, but if you get 8 teams that are allowed in, that's an if, but if you get 8 teams, you can't be thinking like, oh, we're out of the playoff picture, just because we've got 5 wins now. No, if you're 5-6, 5-7, you're in the mix still. You're still in there. You have a chance. So
exactly. So I put that slowly on the head coach there.
yeah,
Um, Titans crushed the Colts. I know they came back, scored some cleanup points with Kobe Brissett in the game in the fourth quarter. That
right.
wasn't much of a
Didn't know any
game.
better.
It was
I,
35-7 or something at halftime.
and,
Um,
and 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 if you're a Colts fan, I mean, does this concern you as far as And Derrick Henry just destroyed them. And I know he's been doing that to teams. He's kind of getting a full head of steam here in the last part of the season. But does that concern you come playoff time for this team
oh, I
or for
do.
the Colts? Yeah,
You're supposed to have one of the best defenses in the league,
right.
and you give up 35 points and a half.
Yeah,
Half, not a game, a half. I know it was 45 the rest of the game, but you're telling me that the Titans were really trying to score points in the second half?
yeah. No,
No,
I
they
agree.
weren't.
I think so too. I mean, I think it's concerning for this team because yeah, they are supposed to have one of the better defenses, and granted, we've seen Derrick Henry and what he can do, late in the season and in the playoffs, obviously. But nevertheless, you want to style yourself as one of the better teams in the league, and one of the best defenses in the league. You just got shellacked. You got handled.
Right, exactly.
So yeah,
You got manhandled, and that would be concerning to me. Um, Giants again, edge the Bengals. Not the big storyline there is Daniel Jones left the game with a hamstring injury. Um, but I mean, really, not even going to talk about the NFC East and playoffs because the champion will get in and lose the first round.
right. Yeah, it doesn't
Um,
really matter.
you
I
have
will say this, I did see, and obviously the Browns beat the Jaguars, so it's not like you beat an opponent that's very good, but the Browns are 8-3, and I know they're not. To me, they're not a legit Super Bowl team or anything like that. So I hope people aren't going crazy. But I just wanted to give them a little bit of respect. We've been dogging Baker Mayfield and kind of getting on them. People were saying that he's a lot better and everything like that. He played well against the Jaguars, but still an inferior opponent. But I'll give them credit where credit's due. They do have 8 wins and 3 losses, and that's nothing to blow your nose at.
well, I'm not going to give them any credit for beating a 1-10 team that's lost 10 games in a row. Um, you should have shellacked them.
Yeah,
You should have shellacked them. So let's just go through here. I want to go through the Browns wins. So they lost to Ravens on opening day, which now looks like a really bad loss because of how the Ravens are playing.
sure, yeah,
They beat the Bengals. They beat the Washington football team. They beat the
right,
Cowboys. They beat the Colts, who's a solid team. I'll give them that.
right, yep.
You lost to the Steelers. You beat the Bengals. You lost to the Raiders. You beat the Texans. You beat the Eagles. You beat the Jaguars.
So the only team with a winning record you beat is Indianapolis.
Correct. Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
not giving them any credit for that. They should be
yeah,
8-3. They
right,
should be. If you want to be considered a good team, win next week against the Titans, then beat the Ravens
sure.
again, and then beat the Steelers in Week 16. If you don't win those 3 games, you're not getting my respect because the rest of the teams, the other 2 teams you play, the Giants and the Jets.
Yeah. I'll just
So
say this though, Coach. In the past, this team, the Browns, wouldn't have been winning any of those games because they were so awful. So I just think, I look at it, I say they do have some merit, and I just wanted to at least acknowledge this team actually won those games against those bad teams as opposed to in the past where they really weren't. This is another 3-13 Browns team or 1-15 Browns team. There's something for them to look at and say, okay, they're at least beating the teams they should beat.
yeah, but I mean, but the thing is, you beat a Jaguars team that probably will not win another game
Yeah,
by 2.
true. Yeah,
By 2. And I'm sorry, you beat an Eagles team the week before by 5. You beat the Texans by 3. Yeah, great. You won those games. But if you want to be considered a top elite team, you aren't edging out wins versus teams below 500.
right.
You are winning those games comfortably and not having to play full bore all game long.
Right.
I just, I mean, let's go to the Jaguars once. Let's go look at this is probably besides their win, it was probably their closest win, their closest game.
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming. Um,
One of them, I would think. Yeah, yeah.
let's go here. So they beat Indianapolis week 1. Then they lost by 3, only to 3 to the Titans, but then they lost by 18, lost by 8 to the Bengals, lost by 16, lost by 18, lost by 10, lost by 2 to the Texans, lost by 4 to the Packers, which again, that's not a good win for the Packers. That's a bad
it's
win.
not. It was.
And we acknowledge the Packers did not play well that game. They're lucky to won that game. Lost to 24 against the Steelers. So the Browns are in second place to the Steelers. I'll tell you right now, when the Steelers play the Browns, that's going to be a 20-point win for the Steelers.
Yeah, I agree with you because they're not an elite team. I'm not saying that at all. I'm giving them credit for the fact that they have a winning record. They have 8 wins right now. No, they haven't really beaten anybody of consequence other than the Colts. But in the past, this Browns team would have found ways to lose all of those games or most of them. So I was just giving them a little credit for being where they are now.
But here's the thing: when you have a talented roster and you get somebody that just knows how to organize a roster, like the head coach does, then you're going to win those games. You again, great they have 8 wins, but I'm not gonna really give them credit for something they should be doing.
Okay.
They should be winning those games. So it's just like haven't given props to any of these other teams that are winning games they should win. It's just if you're supposed to win a game, you win those games. You're not gonna. I'm not gonna be woo yeah great good job.
Yeah, yeah. I'm not going gaga over it or anything. I'm just saying, I've been really on their case all year, and I think it's only fair to say they deserve a little bit of acknowledgement for the wins that they have. That's all.
Moving on, the Bills beat the Chargers, which again isn't shocking.
Well expected, yeah.
We talked about the Falcons crushing the Raiders. That really hurts the Raiders in the playoff standings. That's a really bad loss for them.
Yeah, there's a lot of question marks that come out of a game like that when you get destroyed like that by frankly a team that just they played inspired or played better. They shouldn't destroy you like that. That should not have happened.
Yeah. Should not happen. You have the Chiefs leading the Buccaneers in the afternoon games, 27-10. Looks like it's at the end of the third quarter. not surprising there, to be honest.
No.
One thing I do want to, while we're talking about the Chiefs, Buccaneers, and I remember who I was listening to, and I had texted you this, and it I, I'm really getting fed up with these pundits that have their lips surgically attached to pro athletes' rear ends. Um, I mean, holy cow! If you want me invited to a party of his, just ask him. But I don't remember who it was, but he said, since the Chiefs have Patrick Mahomes, they are the team to beat in the NFL for the next 15 years.
Oh, that was Max Kellerman, your favorite.
Oh, that's right, Max Kellerman.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. How can you say that? Because once this roster, say they repeat this year, because everybody's saying, "Oh, the Chiefs are winning the Super Bowl this year. There's no stopping them." Well, they've been stopped once this year, and I think the Steelers are going to have something to say about that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. There's a couple of teams out there that can beat this Chiefs team.
Right. But if they would repeat, I'm telling you right now, free agents that are on that roster aren't going to care about the rings anymore.
Right.
They're going to want to be paid. Eventually, they aren't going to be able to pay them because they're paying Mahomes too much money.
Right.
So
I don't even know how you can say something like that and actually look at yourself and think that it's a legitimate statement. Like, it just doesn't happen that way in the modern NFL. Teams go out and they win a Super Bowl, and it's hard enough for them to come back the next year to try and repeat because you have a lot of roster turnover usually. And if they do go out and they win it again, absolutely there's going to be a ton of free agents that go out to other teams looking to get paid. And what happens, and I even said this, what happens if Andy Reid decides, you know what, I got 2 titles now, I'm legit, no more of this talk about me being, not quite able to get it done, I've got two Super Bowls, I'm going to retire. Then what happens to Kansas City? 15 years. That's one of the stupidest things I've ever heard.
Right, exactly. I don't get it. I don't know how you make that comment. Yes, they are going to be one of the top teams in the league while Mahomes plays. It's just like the Packers. Except for a couple of years, the Packers have been one of the better teams in the Rodgers era. They've always been in that discussion that they could win the Super Bowl. And I think that's where the Chiefs are. And maybe that's what he meant, but that's not what he said. He said they will be the team to beat.
Right.
I'm sorry. Again.
Yeah, you just can't make that comment, I don't think.
You
can, but I think it just you just have to look at the reality of the situation, and that is just not a realistic statement.
So I found that interesting this past week. But again, they're leading by 17 now going into the fourth quarter, so I'd expect the Chiefs to hold on to win that game. The Rams have come back and taken the lead on the 49ers in the fourth quarter. The 49ers were up 17-3. But the Rams have come back there.
It's a game that the Rams really need and the 49ers really need. I mean, if they're on the outside looking in right now, the 49ers really need to have that. Even if there were to be 8 teams in the playoffs, if they lose this game, I think their chances are very, very minimal. We both thought that they weren't going to make it anyway, but if they lose this game, they're pretty much done. If the Rams win this game, they're really in the driver's seat in the NFC West.
Correct, right, because they're sitting in the 2 seed right now. And if they win if everything plays out the way it is and everything stays the same, they'll be the number 2. Saints will be number 1. Packers number 3. So you're looking at playing that final wild card team, which right now, you're looking at the Bears as of right now. So
yeah, depending on how everything turns out.
Right? I think you're pretty happy with that.
Yeah.
For the 49ers, I think if they end up losing this game, I think you're going to see a pretty big offensive roster shakeup next year. Um,
Hmm.
I think Garoppolo's done in San Francisco. I think they will go out and either try to sign a veteran free agent or draft somebody. Um, you know,
Yeah, I just don't, you look at them and they had a lot of injuries this year. They've been plagued with a lot of issues in that regard. And you have to say to yourself, we're 1 year removed from the Super Bowl. We have a lot of talent on this roster. What is going to get us to that level? What is going to allow us to be at that level again? And I don't think Jimmy Garoppolo is the quarterback that's going to do it for you if you want to win a Super Bowl, you know. So yeah, you've got to go out and you've got to find someone that will be able to do that.
well, I'll tell you right now, two teams that are gonna, you know, it's not necessarily be roster moves, but I think are going to see a big change in their team next year because of coordinators leaving. Are the Chiefs and the 49ers. I think Eric Bieniemy is going to be a head coach and Bobby Saleh is going to be a head coach somewhere next year.
Yeah.
And the 49ers losing him as your defensive coordinator. Some people might not think that's a big deal, but
That's a huge
meshing
deal.
meshing
Yeah.
that talent together on defense, when especially last year when it was a lot. They added Bosa and a couple other guys defensively, but he really took a defense that was subpar with a lot of the same talent and made it one of the best in the league. Just like the Chiefs with Eric Bieniemy, he has done fabulous things in Kansas City. You change coordinators on players, and it changes everything. That's why I think, like for the Chiefs, I think losing Eric Bieniemy is going to be a big deal. When he becomes a head coach, I think that's
Right.
drastically going to impact the Chiefs.
But
Um,
but not so much that they won't dominate over the next 15
right,
years. I mean, yeah.
exactly. You know, um, so, but we'll see. We'll see what happens there. We'll talk about that a little bit more when we get to our keep them or leave them segment.
Sure. Yep.
Um, then in the other afternoon game, just one final, the Saints crushed the Broncos. Of course, they crushed the Broncos. The Broncos weren't even playing a quarterback today, so you know, I don't
Not
even know.
very surprising. Yeah.
I don't know
The
who they.
Saints are just basically humming along at this point. They
Well,
look like they're just kind of humming along, even though there's no Drew Brees. I mean, this they look like they are.
I mean, they are, but at the same time, I don't. I'm not going to sit there and say, they're, you know, go too gaga over these last two games. I mean, you play teams you should beat.
Right. Well, and here's the thing. You were just talking about this before. Not only should beat, but you should destroy. And they
Right.
went out and they did what they should do.
And the Saints should have done that, what they did today, because the Broncos, I'm trying to find out who they even played at quarterback today because they didn't have an active quarterback on their roster. So I'm trying to find out.
Let's see. Kay Hinton. Kay Hinton. Who's Kay Hinton?
Kendall Hinton.
He's a wide receiver.
They threw the ball a whopping 9 times for 13 yards today.
So they
You
put a wide receiver in at quarterback.
Because they didn't have anybody else.
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
So they basically ran Wildcat all day long and stunk.
Yeah.
So you should expect to do that if you're the Saints.
Sure.
Um,
Yeah. You
so
definitely
again,
do.
I'm not just like with the Browns. I'm not going to get all, oh my Lord, look at this,
Right.
because of what they did today. You played a team without a quarterback, like literally. Not
Yeah,
like
yeah.
have
This
a
isn't
bad
figurative.
quarterback.
This is literal. I mean,
This is
there
literally
was no quarterback
they
in.
did not have a quarterback today. So, um, you should have done what you did.
Yeah,
Okay. And then tonight's game, the Bears Packers. Mitch Trubisky is starting today. This could be, I think, is the beginning of the end for Matt Nagy. Oh,
yeah.
and the Buccaneers just scored a touchdown, making it a 10-point game. So, um, but yeah, I think the Matt Nagy era is going to be done at the end of the season there. And then you got the Monday night game. You got Seahawks Eagles. I don't even think that's going to be a game. They're talking Jalen Hurts is going to actually get some playing time. So if you're serious about trying to win that division and making a playoff run, and you think Wentz is your guy, you aren't giving Jalen Hurts snaps.
No,
So this tells me
no.
the Eagles are basically bailing on the rest of the season, knowing that, hey, yeah, even if we win this division this year, we're not going anywhere.
Yeah, and to me, in that division, they are the most disappointing of all the teams. Because we expect shenanigans in Dallas. We expected Washington and New York to not be very good, but I expected more out of Philadelphia this year, and I didn't think they were going to be 13-3 or anything like that. I didn't expect them to be amazing, but they have been just abysmal for what they really should have been, and that's telling, and that puts and keeps Doug Peterson in a hot seat situation going into the end of the year. So
And then finally, Tuesday, we already talked about it a little bit, the Ravens versus the Steelers. Um, you could have you're gonna have possibly numerous people out of that game if it played Lamar Jackson, James Connors, to name a few. Um, the one positive thing there, though, the Ravens do have RG3 as their back quarterback, who is at least a veteran quarterback to play. I don't think he can beat the Steelers, but you never know.
yeah, I at least he goes out there and he's serviceable. It's not a Broncos situation where you're starting a wide receiver as your quarterback. I mean, at least you got a guy who is a veteran who can play quarterback and who can put something together for you out there on the field. But I think the Steelers are run away with this game.
All right. So, new segment here I wanted to start out, and it's not going to be very long. It's not going to be very big segment, but keep them or leave them. And what that
Yep.
is, Lone Wolf, is we're going to talk about the interim coaches and whether those teams should hire that interim coach as their actual head coach. So, if you would you keep them or leave them? And then I think at the end of our hot seat segment, we'll quick talk about some coaching candidates because believe it or not, in a couple of weeks we're going to be talking about teams hiring new coaches. We're only after
No,
tonight
we're 11 games in here.
right.
Yeah, we're definitely going to be talking about it for sure.
So we're going to be talking about that soon. So the first team, I'm just going to go down the list: the Atlanta Falcons. Raheem Morris. Would you keep him or leave him?
I would leave him. I know that they played better. I know they had a big win today over the Raiders, but I didn't like what I saw out of Raheem Morris when he was in Tampa, and that would concern me as far as moving forward. I think he has more of a legitimate shot than some others just because of the way that this team has been playing and responding. They're 4-7 now after starting off 0-5, but I just that's what concerns me about him is just previous experience and what I saw. So I would leave him.
I would leave him also. Not necessarily for what he did in Tampa. I don't think he was ready in Tampa. I think that was I'm not sure what went into that that pick there. My concern is when yes, you're 4-2 since he took over, but you beat the Broncos by 7, you beat the Panthers by 12. You did handle the Vikings in that first game, but that's when the Vikings were not playing well at all. I think if they would replay that game, I think the Vikings would win that game. But you lost to the Lions, and then you lost to the Saints by 15. Um, I think this whole organization needs a reset. You're looking at a major transition here in probably another year or two. Matt Ryan is probably getting to that point where he's either going to retire or be on a team that is a legit contender. You know, again, if I'm Matt Ryan, depending on the moves Atlanta would make early in the offseason, I'm looking at that situation and asking for a trade or my release. New Orleans is going to be good because they win despite not having Drew Brees. You have Tampa Bay, who you take Tom Brady out there, they're probably not sitting where they're at, but he's going to be there at least next year also. And they have Carolina, who is an up and coming team. I really think Matt Ryan's going to want a change here and an opportunity to win a Super Bowl. So I think that's why the franchise just needs a reset. I don't think you just keep the same roster and replace one coach. I think everything needs to be changed because they're looking at a rebuild here. You have a young receiver in Ridley. Julio Jones probably needs to be moved. You need to don't bring Todd Gurley back. I mean, I really think
that's pretty obvious. And on defense, they need to make some roster changes, definitely.
Right. So I'd also leave Raheem Morris and go in a different direction. The next one, Romeo Crennel in Houston. Keep him or leave him?
I don't think the organization views Romeo as anything other than a good person to steady the ship and manage the team for the remainder of the year. Clearly, to me, this is a leave him situation. Here again, I think you need a reset with this organization. You need a different GM than what you had with Bill O'Brien, and you need a separate GM head coach situation. So I say leave him. He's a well tenured guy in the NFL, but I don't think he's a head coach any longer. He's managing it well for this year for the Texans. Keep the things together. He's steady, but they need to move in a different direction and have a new head coach and a new GM to rebuild that franchise, especially on defense, because you've got some players that they may need to be moved, like a JJ Watt or something is getting a little older. And I don't think that Romeo is going to be your guy as a long-term solution. So I say leave him.
And I agree there. I think his age would concern me. Just as a long-term head coaching candidate at this point. He's what, 72, 73. He's in his 70s.
Yeah.
So I'd be concerned that being able to last a full season on the sidelines doing the work of the head coach. And I think I'd like him to probably stay on as offensive coordinator because obviously he has a connection with Watson, since his time there. But I think you need a sideline presence of youth and energy.
Yeah.
think Romeo does that.
No, like I
So,
said, he's managing the ship. He's keeping everything steady. The players like him, but yeah, he's not the voice for the future going forward with his franchise.
and then the last one, who was just named the other day, Daryl Bevel with the
Yeah.
Detroit Lions. He hasn't coached the game, but would you keep him or leave him?
And this is such a hard thing to say because he's never been a head coach in the league ever. And so I am very intrigued by this as to whether or not this is going to work out. My initial instinct here is to say keep him because I kind of want this thing to work out for Darrell Bevel. He's been around the league. He's been with some really good franchises and on some really good teams. And I would just like to see it work. And it's a little premature, but I'm going to say keep him.
I'm gonna say leave him.
Okay.
Uh, and the reason for that is he was with, like you said, some very successful franchises and
Right.
organizations in the same role, but they let him go.
Yeah.
And there's a reason for that. It's not just, oh, I want to change or this or that. There's a reason that the Seahawks did not keep Darrell Bevel as their offensive coordinator and let him go to Detroit. There's a reason for that. What that reason is, I don't know, but it's not a good reason if you're going from a team in which you were helping get to the Super Bowl
Yeah.
and now you're with the Detroit Lions. There's something there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if I'm Detroit, I'm leaving him. You fired your GM, you fired the head coach. You need to go out and find a football guy to run the GM operations and that knows the game of football and how to put together a roster
Mm-hmm.
for longevity purposes and not a quick patchwork to try to win games, and then bring in the guy that he trusts. Um,
Yeah.
I, I don't like this scenario the NFL is in right now, where the owner goes out and hires a coach that they like, and then brings in the GM and says you need to make it work with the
Yeah.
GM.
That does. I don't like that either. I agree. I
And
agree.
that's kind of where the league is right now, though, and it's
Yeah.
really weird because if I'm going into and somebody wants me to be a general manager, I want my guy that I trust on the sidelines because my
Oh
job
yeah.
is predicated on how successful that guy is. And if I didn't get to hire him, why should his performance reflect on me?
Well, and it doesn't always work out that way, but in this situation, it will because the GM is gone. So you can have the GM come in, and then you can get the coach that you want. Yeah, I guess I just out of a desire maybe to see what he does. Now, I may say that right now, coach, but again, we don't know what he's going to do over the next 5 games. So, if the Lions go on a tear, no pun intended, you know, yeah, we'll see. Maybe there's something great there. I don't know, but I just say that now. So we'll see.
All right. And that's it right now for leave them. Keeping those are only three interim coaches
Yep.
right now. But I thought it would be kind of interesting to talk about because we really haven't mentioned those franchises and their coaches since we started doing Hot List. And then all of a sudden the dominoes fell with Bill O'Brien,
Right.
things like that.
Dan Quinn. Yeah. Yep.
So next, moving on to our hot seat. Now, this won't be our last segment because I also want to touch on who are possible coaching candidates out there
Okay.
that we feel are going to be head coaches, and we don't necessarily need to fill all head coaching vacancies.
No.
So
No.
there's going to be some surprise hires um, out there, but we will talk about who we feel will be good fits for some franchises. Um, to be honest, my list hasn't changed too much
Yeah.
uh, from last week to this week. Number five, actually no, I'm going to change it up here. My number five this week is still going to be Doug Peterson. It was Mike McCarthy last week. Move Peterson down to number 5. Um, they haven't played yet this week, so that could change. But with the news of Jalen Hurts getting snaps and them getting ready to play them, I think management understands kind of where that whole division's at, and that they're even if you win that division, it's not really going to matter. That they're going to give him a pass this year. I'd still put him on the hot seat just because you're going to get public pressure. But I think from a management standpoint, they understand the situation that Wentz may not be the guy anymore, and they want to
That's the
evaluate.
biggest question mark for them, right? Exactly.
So I think Peterson's seat is a little cooler, even if they don't end up making the postseason, because I think management kind of sees the landscape and knows you might win the division, but you're not if you're not winning a playoff game. So that's my number 5.
I was going to say 2 comments, and one is, let's just clarify again for everybody, Adam Gase is not on this list. He's still on
Correct.
the Walking Dead list. He will be there for the rest of the year. He's, as in our minds, he's already fired. So just getting that out there. The other comment is, Matt Patricia obviously is now gone. He's somebody we've talked about quite a bit. He was not on our top 5 last week, but he was a close 6th.
Right.
So I mean, he was not like he was going to survive the season, in our opinion.
Well, they were sitting at 4-6, and if they beat the Texans, you're sitting at 5-6.
Right,
And
so
I'm
it's not, yeah, you're still in good shape. You have a possibility there.
right.
Yeah.
So if you but you come on, you got obliterated on Thanksgiving Day.
Yeah.
So it just shows you
I
how
think they knew where their season was going and what direction it was going after losing a couple more games, and putting themselves at 4-7. They're pretty much out of the hunt.
Yeah.
So that's about it. Yeah. Yeah. So my number 5 is the same. Actually, I had Doug Peterson, I think, at number 4, but I did bump him down to number 5 here. I think I agree. The biggest issue for them is Carson Wentz still going to be the guy? He's been injured so much, and he just does not look like the same quarterback this year. And what question marks you have going into it, but I agree. The Eagles tend to be a little bit more sensible, even though their fans are rabid. The management tends to be a little more sensible. So Peterson may yet come back, but he's still on the hot seat. I mean, if he goes out there and you lose the rest of your games, I think they're going to get a lot of pressure as to whether they're going to keep him or not.
Right. Exactly. Moving to number 4. He has moved up my list, even though again I don't think they'll pull the trigger. I think they should, for their franchise's sake, as a fan's sake. Yeah, keep them around as long as you want because it's entertaining as heck. But that is Mike Cheeseburger McCarthy at number 4. An embarrassing loss to the Redskins on Thanksgiving Day. You are getting no production out of Ezekiel Elliott right now. You're seeing exactly what the Packers saw in Mike McCarthy those last 2 seasons that you're seeing this year, and in an inability to adjust his scheme to what teams are doing. He's stubborn. He's not willing to change things and kind of play to his team's strengths and what the defense is giving him. He is saying, nope, this is what we're doing. I don't care. We're going to find a way to make it work. And it's not working. So he is my number 4.
Yeah, and my number 4 is, I think it was my number 5. It might have been Anthony Lynn from the Chargers, and so I think he was my number 4 last week. But he's still on there. He rose a little bit to me. I still feel like, and the Chargers have building blocks there, but Anthony Lynn is not going to be the guy to continue to lead this squad. They went out and they played pretty well overall, I guess, against Buffalo, as well as maybe can be expected for this team. They're not great. So they've never really been embarrassing, I don't think. And they have a quarterback that looks like the quarterback of the future. But I think it's one of those at the end of the season, they're going to move on from Anthony Lynn.
All right. My number 3 is Anthony Lynn. He was actually my number 2 last week. I bumped him down to number 3. I think they'll replace him because of the record, even though I think he's doing a decent job. I mean, they're in games. They just
Right.
can't win games. I don't know if what that reason is, but they just can't seem to put that last part of a game together to win these close games. So Lynn is my number 3.
Yeah, and my number 3 is Mike McCarthy. He was my number 1. He fell from that pedestal a little bit, even though he didn't do himself any favors by getting destroyed by Washington. Ultimately, he has to go, and is he going to? I don't know. It sounds like maybe they want to think about retaining him for next year. You'd said this before, Coach. Jerry Jones doesn't like admitting mistakes, and that would seem to be like you're admitting a mistake. So round and round we go in Dallas again. However, it's the same saga of Mike McCarthy that we saw at the end of his tenure with the Packers. And he just needs to go. He's not an effective head coach. End of story.
All right. Number 2 on my list is Doug Marrone of the Jaguars. And I put this list together, before I knew about the firing of the GM. So really, I mean, that could put Doug Marrone on the Walking Dead list next week, because normally when your GM is fired, you're not far after. So he's my number 2 because, again, I mean, he is kind of right on that same pedestal as Adam Gase. But they are in tank mode. And the GM put that roster together. He's doing the best he can with the roster, even though it's not a very good job. And he's been given multiple opportunities to right that ship and has not been able to do so.
Yeah. And so my number 2, this guy for me has moved up the list to the number 2 spot. He was my number 3 last week, and that's Matt Nagy of the Bears. They're right in the thick of the playoff hunt, and that's what's disappointing about this team is they're right in the middle of it, but I just feel like they're going to go in a downward direction for the remainder of the year. And it's not just the quarterback controversy that bothers me. We've talked about that ad nauseum. What bothers me is the ineffectiveness of the entire offense. They don't seem to be able to have a formula of any type to run the football. And I'm concerned about that as an offensive coach. You come in here and you're supposed to show that you've got something figured out on that side. And he really does not. In this defense, they've got talent. And so they've been able to at least keep the Bears in some games this season. But it's not enough when your offense can't do anything. So to me, Matt Nagy is moving up the list. I know he was your number 1 last week. To me, he's moved up to number 2. He's more in jeopardy now than he was, and I think they're going to get destroyed by the Packers. So it's going to be a 5-6, and you're looking at a much worse situation.
And that leads me to my number 1, which is still Matt Nagy. The expectations have outweighed the results. He has made some very poor coaching decisions, personnel wise. When you look at, um, you know, who started quarterback and how he handled that entire situation. And then, when Foles gets hurt in their last game, Trubisky's not suited. They say he have a shoulder injury, but it's just it's a mess there. And I think not only Nagy but their general manager should be shown the door.
100%
There,
agree.
and that general manager has been there a long time. It is time to clean house there in Chicago while you have a talented defense. If you get the right coach in there with that defense, the Bears could be a potential threat in the NFC North, because that defense is good.
It is. And you could see an offense that's halfway decent, and they'd be in a much better position than they are
Exactly.
right now. So,
Exactly.
yeah. My number one, this guy moved up, and we just talked about the general manager being gone, but I think it was inevitable. I shook up my list a little bit because I really think that this guy needed to go and needs to go more now than before, and that's Marone from the Jaguars. He's had plenty of opportunities there to get this done, and it just has not materialized. So it's about time. I mean, they are in tank mode, like you said. This year's done and gone, and Marone needs to be moved on. And honestly, I don't know that he lands himself as a head coach for next year. So I don't think he will. So that's pretty telling. But he's my number one guy. I think we just have to reserve the Walking Dead list for Adam Gase because he's such a special case. He's so awful. There's really no other way to describe it. So I think Marone will get the top spot for me, and then we'll leave Adam Gase out there in fired land.
All right, and of course we have Adam Gase, who um, you lost again today. You probably will not win a game and have one of the worst teams in NFL history. So you'll be in the record books for something.
Yes, just what you want. And I don't know. I mean, Coach, they could almost bring back Rich Kotite right now, and they might do better.
Probably. They probably would be thanking the heavens for Rich Kotite at this point in time. So, last thing, just quick before we wrap things up for the night here. We talked, the hot list, and we talked, keep them or leave them. So when we're looking at this, kind of forecasting into next year, who are some people that you feel may be more likely to be head coaches than coordinators or even college coaches next year? Give me a couple of names here.
Well,
That you
I think
think.
you mentioned a couple already that I think we need to talk about, and that's Eric Bieniemy and Robert Saleh from the 49ers. Both of them, I don't even think to me that I shouldn't say it's not a question, but I think both of them will be head coaches next year. I think I don't say it's a foregone conclusion, but I think both of them should be head coaches next year.
Yeah, and I agree. Those two, people keep saying Lincoln Riley from Oklahoma. I just read a report that that teams should consider Nick Saban again.
No, he's never
I,
going to leave Alabama anyway.
I mean, I don't know why you would leave Alabama. I mean, but other names out there that, and you seem to hear these every year. So
Yeah.
I'll read off a couple. Greg Roman, offense coordinator of the Ravens. Brandon
Yep.
Staley, defensive coordinator of the Rams. This is a new one I haven't really heard of. It's Adam Stenovich, the Packer O-line coach.
Yeah. Yeah, I saw that. I'd seen that too, and I was a little surprised by that as far as a head coaching job would be concerned. I would figure he'd transition more into a coordinator role as opposed to jumping up to a head coach. Not that a position coach can't do that, but that's a little surprising to me. He's been a great offensive line coach, but
Right. So that was interesting. Um,
I had one guy here, and I was thinking about this, and he's been with this organization for several years now, many years now actually, and I don't know if teams would be interested in him or not, or if he'd make a great head coach, but he definitely has the right mindset for a team that needs a solid defense, and that's Keith Butler, the defensive coordinator from the Steelers. Um,
hmm.
I was just looking at that and I was thinking, obviously he's put together a very, very, very good defense. Is it possible for him to maybe sit down and get a head coaching position?
I
I don't know.
mean, it could. He was mentioned, I think 4 or 5 years ago,
Yeah,
um, and it just never materialized. I also saw like Leslie Frazier was back on lists.
sure.
Um, Todd Bowles was back
Yeah.
on this. I'm like, okay, So when you're looking at it, it's like, do you think any of these guys that were fired this year, like Dan Quinn, Bill O'Brien, um, Matt Patricia, you think they'll get another head coaching opportunity?
Not next year. I don't think any of them will. Um, well, let me take that back. Bill O'Brien had some success, even though ultimately everything fell apart. So I think Bill O'Brien could potentially get a head coaching job. No one will give him the GM head coaching thing he had in Houston, but I could see him potentially getting a shot as a head coach. The other two, no. I mean, they didn't have success, and I don't think teams want to jump on that when you really don't have a lot of success. Not that teams haven't done that before, but I don't foresee them getting a chance as a head coach next year. They potentially could land in a coordinator role, but not a head coach.
Right, and I agree. I don't think next year for sure. I think Dan Quinn might get another shot at some point. I think Matt Patricia will never get another opportunity. I think he'll end up being a very great long-term defensive coordinator somewhere, maybe a college coach, but I cannot see him getting another opportunity in the NFL.
Right.
Uh, Bill O'Brien, I like you said, it would have to be just head coach. Um, he will never get that opportunity to do dual roles again.
No.
Um, I don't believe you can be effective that way. I mean, there's only been one guy that's been effective at doing that, and that is Belichick.
Right. Right. It's
Everybody
just a
else,
rare. It's a rarity that you have somebody that can do that, and you've seen a lot of teams that have tried that in the past, and ultimately it doesn't work out. I mean, like Mike Holmgren had that in Seattle. Um, and yes, they made it to the Super Bowl. I get it, but ultimately it didn't work out. Um, what's the measure of that? I think it's a long term success, and most people just can't do that. Most people just can't do both jobs.
exactly,
So
and it's too much to do for one person.
yeah.
You know. So, all right. Anything else, Lone Wolf?
I was just gonna say, when we're talking about coaching candidates here, I'd like to see, and that's why I brought up like a Keith Butler and some of these guys. I want to see some guys that are fresh faces. Not Keith Butler's been around the league for a long time, but I want to see a fresh face as a head coach. Because you just mentioned a bunch of names there that are retreads, of coaches that have been out there, they've lost their job, like a Todd Bowles, something like that. And I want to see some fresh faces for teams. If they want a fresh start, I think you bring in a new guy to be your guy and not a retread and say, okay, let's get a real fresh start. Bring somebody new in, like if you want to restart the franchise, you bring in somebody like Bieniemy. He hasn't been the head coach anywhere. Make him your head coach, run with that guy and see how it works out. That kind of thing. That's what I really like to see. So
Right, and I agree. The NFL needs some fresh faces. Um, you're gonna get retreads. You're gonna,
you are.
I guarantee, Todd Bowles and those guys, they will get another opportunity.
Sure.
Whether, my philosophy is that some people are just made to be made out and are going to be really good coordinators.
Right.
It's just the way it is.
Norv Turner is the perfect example, in my opinion.
Exactly.
Yeah. Great as a coordinator, but he's just been really unsuccessful as a head coach.
Right. Exactly. And you have a lot of guys in that category. I can't think of the long-term coordinator from the Steelers that went to the
Dick
Bengals.
LeBeau. Yeah,
Dick LeBeau. Same thing. He was a great defensive coordinator, horrible head coach, and he even admitted it.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
And he was so good that the Bengals fired him, and the Steelers hired him right back to be their defensive coordinator. And I think the next year they won the Super Bowl.
Right, and he was super successful at it. Exactly. So
I mean, it's just being a head coach, especially in the NFL, is a different animal. It's just a different thing. So, all right. Well, Lone Wolf, if there's nothing else, that is it for tonight. I want to thank everybody that listens. Again, we are on Podbean and YouTube, and we will be back. From what I know, our normal day and time on Thursday, and go over next week's games in the NFL and probably do some playoff predictions. Who's going to make it? Who's not going to make it?
Yeah, that sounds good. Yep. No Thanksgiving next week, so we should be back at our normal time.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Have a great night, and we will talk to you on Thursday.
All right. Good night.